Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. The Snotling pump wagons have been released upon the world, and the world should tremble at their approach, as we have this matchup between the Greenskins and the Dawi in this Warhammer World Championship Group 2 stage matchup between Orcman on the Greenskins and Astellan will be commanding the Dawi. So for the Greenskin forces, we do have that pair of Snotling pump wagons, a nice little fun unit to be seeing, not one you traditionally will be seeing all too often in pretty much any matchup. We also do have 4 Night Goblin Squig Hoppers, one of which is the Durkit Squigs. Night Goblins ROR, going to be rolling on in, and these guys have that nice immune psychology, not much to fear about for the Dawi though. But nice little armor-piercing bonus versus infantry units that do have poison. What more could you ask for against the armored Dawi? Now for the rest of the forces, we do have some goblins mixed in with some orc boys, and then we do have some savage orcs on the sides here. Going to be causing a bit of nice damage to those Dawi forces, but most of that frontline stopping power is going to be with the stone trolls. Stone trolls bonus versus or armor piercing, and they have high armor themselves, and they have that nice little bit of missile resist, so they can just kind of tank a lot of that Dawi fire, but they're not immune to it, so they will take some damage. They do have to be wary though of like troll hammers, for example, and also against slayers will do quite a number to these guys. For the Lord and Hero, we do have Agrom the Paunch rolling on in. And he is going to be bringing the Language of the Boys, giving him an AoE melee defense and leadership buff, as well as the Great Un is here, and the Axe of Grom. Now, he is missing his Lucky Banner. That is definitely a ability I would have liked to be seeing on this guy, especially with that damage resist. It's just so very, very helpful, especially if you are going to be charging the Dawi handgun or the Thunderer line. Definitely a scary thing to be facing, but having that damage resist would be very nice to have in that situation. We do have an Orc Shaman as well, bringing the Gaze of Mork as well as the Foot of Gork. So the Foot of Gork, a very powerful explosion area, and even against the Dawi's magic resist, it will be able to do some nice bit of work to them. Now, speaking of the Dawi, let's see what they've got to offer. Is they have a nice kind of onion style deployment, as we have some miners on the just the secondary line, going to be behind these dwarf warriors. Miners going to be good at kind of clearing out all of that kind of chaff infantry, while we have a group of thunderers in kind of the tertiary formation, going to be getting a nice bit of long range armor piercing fire in, and these guys are going to be the stopping power of the Dawi line. And we do have a couple of cannons as well to be firing at range at the approaching Greenskin Wa. In the back line, we do have some Dragonback Slayers and some regular Slayers just going to be holding things back, and they're going to have their hands full against all of these Night Goblin Squig Hoppers. There's going to be quite a few of them trying to get their way into the Thunderers, the cannons, and the like. We do have one more Dwarf Warrior kind of just supporting that backline, keeping these Thunderers nice and cozy inside the box. And then for the Lords and Heroes, we do have the Dwarf Lord. So definitely a different pick here. Normally, if you are going very cheap, you are going to be seeing like Belagar, but there is also going to be a Rune Smith with the Rune of Wrath and Ruin, and the Rune of Wrath and Ruin is going to be paired with the Hammer of Karakdraz. So the Karakdraz is going to be a minus 30 base weapon damage debuff and minus 40 melee attack as well, and this does recharge when he is engaged in melee. Definitely a little different combination here. If you're going to be bringing a Rune Smith, usually we're going to be expecting to see like Grombrindle, for example, or something of that nature, instead of seeing a Lord. And with this combination, you probably expect to see a Rune Lord instead, or maybe, yeah, Belagar, as I think I was saying before. Otherwise, that is going to be it for the Dawi formation. And they also do have the Warriors Dragonfire Pass, which I did forget earlier on with their flaming attacks. But against Stone Trolls, I don't know how much damage they will be able to do against them. But let's get things rolling as the Greenskins do charge up the hill. Going to be facing that cannon fire as they cross the plains to face that Dawi box, and in come the Snotling pump wagons. Going to be the first to crest that hill, and they will be charging right on in to the gates of death, as they'll be facing a mighty handgun and cannon crew as they do approach. So the Dawi just going to be content so far, just going to sit back, relax, fire away with their cannons, but they do need to be very mindful of these Night Goblin Squig Hoppers, which are going to be circling around in the back here, and that is, of course, as I've mentioned before, going to be putting pressure on the Dragback Slayers and the Slayers, because there is going to be quite a few of them. They will be only able to stop so many, so they will need to turn their attention that direction, maybe pull off a miner, or just kind of reposition these Dwarf Warriors here to kind of just at least kind of contend these guys, because they definitely do not want these guys shutting down the Thunderers for too long. But the Thunderers are doing a lot of good work on the early stages, shutting down the Snotling Pump Wagons pretty heavily. The Snotling Pump Wagons do tank some of those miners with blasting charges, so they're wasting a little bit of that ammunition, although these guys are going to be routing off the field and going to be taking some mighty shots into the rear as they do retreat. But that last salvo just doing a ton of damage, and that is going to be losing its second piece there, and they do just outright shatter. Other unit does get routed off. It did have that Ruin of Wrath and Ruin popped on it, so it is going to be slowing them down. They did shut down the cannon crews for a short period of time, though, but they did take a ton of damage otherwise, so mostly just a disruption tool. But this guy should be coming back here. Night Goblin Squig Hoppers getting pushed back by the Slayers here as they do kind of screen these guys out. But they are going to be pulling in these Slayers just a little bit out of position, but otherwise the rest of the front line is underway as they charge on forward. Miners getting off all of their charges, and then in come the Stone Trolls, charging right on in to the gates of death as they just face off against all of these Thunderers, just firing in point-blank range. And at this point, though, the Slayers would definitely love to be up in that front line helping those Stone Trolls, but they cannot afford to do that with those Night Goblin Squig Hoppers in their rear, and a nice foot of Gork going right on in, doing a nice bit of damage to these Thunderers, but for the most part, that damage was missed by the Dawi. And now things are getting a little dicey for those Dawi, though the Stone Trolls are going to get routed off here just for the time being, though. There's not enough mobility for the Dawi. I mean, there's no mobility for the Dawi to really chase these guys back, and all of the Thunderers are otherwise occupied trying to shoot down these Night Goblin Squig Hoppers, keeping them out of that back line. So these guys will be back, and they will have more health than when they have left. As Grom the Punch now engaging with the Lord here. He does have that Rune of Wrath and Ruin popped on him, as well as the Hammer of Karakdaz, so he has pretty much no damage output here, but he does pop that Great One is here, giving himself a little bit of extra leadership, and he is taking quite a bit of damage. And in come the charge of the Night Goblin Squig Hoppers, getting into the back line, charging into those routing miners, and they have a nice open path here to all of these Thunderers getting right on in, and the rest of the units definitely getting pretty just stressed out here as they have just so many units just flooding into the back lines, as the Thunderers are going to be shut down pretty much across the board at this point, and they are going to be pushing back. The Stone Trolls have returned to the fight, and things looking pretty grim, especially on this flank here for the Dawi. Not a whole lot holding them back except for the Dragonback Slayers, and the Dragonback Slayers don't want to be holding that line. They definitely want something else to be doing that, because they are needed elsewhere. They are unbreakable, so they will hold, but otherwise, for the most part, these Stone Trolls just pathing straight on through, and another foot of Gork going right on in, doing a nice bit of damage to these Thunderers as they were grouped up a little bit around Grom. And in come the Night Goblin Squig Hoppers onto these cannon crews, going to be doing some nice bit of damage. Even though they only have 18 models left, they should be able to kind of clean up these cannon crews pretty quickly. And Grom rolling in through these back lines, shutting down the Thunderers, charging left, right, and center. He does get a Rune of Wrath and Ruin on top of him. That is going to be reducing his speed and charge speed. It doesn't look like it is affecting him too much here, but there is that kind of slow on that front. The Rune Lord or Rune Smith is pretty much isolated at this point, just getting beaten down by all of these Stone Trolls as they just surround him and are just wailing on him with their mighty clubs. The miners that were in assistance here are going to be getting pushed back. Things looking mighty grim for the Dawi indeed, as the Greenskins pushing very heavily. The momentum for them has just been so great in this fight, especially with that Stone Trolls, and they're just getting into that back line. All of the Night Goblin Squig Hoppers as well, just causing havoc in that back line, pushing all of the Thunderers out, though they have been able to regroup in these back lines and are targeting Ground the Paunch. These Slayers are trying to get on top of him, but without a Rune of Wrath and Ruin, they're not going to be able to stop him into his tracks. The cannon crew's still online though, and they will be targeting Grom. Might be able to get a nice bit of damage here, but at this point I think it's just too little too late. There's just not enough stuff to stop all of these units from the Greenskins. I mean, the Savage Orcs, the Stone Trolls are very, very healthy. These guys are pretty much at full health, and the other one has only lost one bottle, and they will be healing throughout all of this. So I don't think there is any hope left for the Dawi at this point. Grom finishing off one of the last of the Thunderers, and I think army losses should be taking effect any time now. Even the Goblins getting into the fight here, shutting down the cannon crews, and with them gone, I think we'll be seeing the end of this first fight in the best of three. Just a final charge into this mix, and there's going to be army losses. Greenskins take game one. And that is going to be all she wrote. So let's take a look at the after battle report, update the scorecard, as well as Orcman does take game one with a nice fun greenskin build. So let's take a look at the after battle report as well. The cannon crews, unfortunately, did not do a whole lot of good work. They were shooting at snotlings, but I mean, snotlings not really a whole lot of value. I think they really just needed to target Grom as much as physically possible. I mean, he does regen, but they need to do damage somehow, because the only thing they really had that could do well against him is the Slayers, the Cannons, and the Thunderers, and with them getting just harassed the entire game by these Night Goblin Squig Hoppers, which was really nice to be having all of that distractions for the Dawi, forcing their attention multiple different ways so they couldn't focus fire the targets that they needed to. Thunderers did do, at least one of them did some okay work, but otherwise just having them get shut down as they were, or just distracted, I think is the biggest thing, was a big play for the Greenskins. Slayers doing some okay work, but otherwise the Dwarf Warriors, they were not able to carry the weight that they needed to in this fight, especially with the Runesmith and the Lord not really being able to really carry their own weight here. I really think, yeah, you do need a strong melee combatant like Grombrindle. I think would be a definitely good addition to this roster here, or yeah, probably Grombrindle or a Rune Lord, something of that nature. And then as for the Greenskin side, Grom, the Orc Shaman, didn't necessarily do all too much value themselves. Otherwise, the rest of the forces kind of quickly going through them. These Orc boys did some nice, decent work, as did the Savage Orcs doing some good work. And then I guess the heroes of the day, the Night Goblin Squig Hoppers, doing a ton of nice and juicy damage in that backline. But then you have the Stone Trolls as well, sitting very healthy in that late game, and that's kind of one of the big factors there. Both of them getting over 800 in value, and yeah, they just kind of a wrecking crew of unstoppable forces. They just kind of pushed right on through the Dawi lines and did a lot of good work. Unfortunately, Stotlings, though, didn't really do a whole lot. Getting shot to pieces on the approach, probably just a little bit too far ahead of the rest of the Greenskin forces. But otherwise, that's going to be it for Game 1. Let's roll right on in to Game 2. Throt, with his ravenous hunger, takes charge of the Skaven forces in this Game 2 fight of this best of 3 between Orcman and Astellan. Orcman taking command of the Skaven, as Astellan has control of the Tomb Kings here. So for the Skaven roster, we do have, of course, Throt, the Unclean, going to be up on his Brood Horror. And for his abilities, he is going to be bringing the Beast Pack, giving himself a summon of Rat Ogres. He does have a Remoldered, which does give a nice bit of healing, 2 charges of that to any Clan Molder monster, and he has Master Controller to boot as well, giving +4 leadership and melee defense in an AoE around him. He'll be supported by another Packmaster up on a Brood Horror, which is bringing Running with the Pack, which does give regeneration to Clan Molder units, and that will pair nicely with the couple of Rat Ogres that are also on the field for the Skaven. And then for spellcasting, we are going to be seeing an Astellan Sorcerer. A very interesting pick here, not one you'll be seeing considering how valuable either bringing Ruin or Plague is for the Skaven side. So for the Skaven, he is going to be bringing Warp Stars, which is kind of like pretty much a missile, a magic missile. Think just shurikens for ninjas there. And then we have some Armor of Darkness, giving +22% to missile resist and 60 armor. And against things like Boshapti or something of that nature from the Tomb Kings, can do a nice little bit of extra just staying power for some of like the Brood Horrors, for example, would be nice juicy targets for them. And then we have Brittle Bone, giving -24 speed, -40 melee defense, and -9 vigor. Now for 11 wins of magic, probably not quite worth it for just that speed and melee defense, but if you really need to take down some like big construct with getting both of your broods on top of them, it might be worth the spells getting that melee defense nice and low. We also do have Ikit's Zap Zap coming on in the ROR Warp Lightning Cannon, which does give the Zap Zap, which does give a plus, I believe it's +15 to ability recharge. So if you are able to target the spellcaster on these guys, it is able to kind of just slow down their spell casting, so +10 seconds on that, and then just keep them from using spells exactly when they want to. And it can be a nice, helpful use, especially considering the Tomb Kings want to be casting spells over and over and over again, and their lords are nice targets for that, considering they're going to be most of the time the spellcasters. We have some Clan Rats mixed in for the rest of the units, some Skaven Slaves, and then we have some Eshin Triads in the back. For the ranged, it is going to be just some Skaven Slaves, just trying to just pluck away at the low-armored Tomb King forces, and then using those Rat Ogres just kind of screen things out as best they can. But for the Tomb King side, we do have some Carrion up in the sky. They will have a very heavy mobility core as well. We have 2 Skeleton Chariots here. We have Cetra the Imperishable up on his Kemrian War Sphinx, going to be rolling on through. Of course, he has Fear and Terror when he is up on top there. He has the Blessed Blade of Batra, which gives fire damage, and is particularly useful against Throt and that Packmaster, who are going to be weak to fire damage. And then we have Wrath of Batra, We have Ushep's Incantation of Desiccation. Again, probably not necessarily the best matchup for that. You don't really need to reduce the melee defense and melee attack in an AoE around it, but he does still have the Dru's Incantation of Protection and the Incantation of Cursed Blades, which are two of the spells you generally want to be casting as often as you can with the Restless Dead lore passive. He also does have Unyielding Will, which gives +5 melee attack and melee defense around him. And then for the rest of the mobility core, we have 4 Nehekran Horsemen and 4 Skeleton Horse Archers. So lots of mobility, looking to get a lot of pressure into as many sides of the Skaven side as he can, and really these Nehekran Horsemen will do quite well in the mobility game, especially with how many there are. And then for the infantry, just going to be some Skeleton Spearmen, just kind of spread throughout with 1 unit of Skeleton Warriors. And against what the Skaven have, that should be enough to kind of hold that line, and they do have that fear themselves, so that will help against the low armored Skaven, or low leadership Skaven. And that is going to be it for the armies, so let's get this game rolling in earnest, as the Carrion going to be flying overhead. Slingers are going to be targeting them, but not really doing a whole lot of damage so far. There isn't really a whole lot of threats to these Carrion guys at this time. I mean, pretty much all of the slingers, even if they are firing up by them, they'd have to be like right overhead to even get any kind of good, decent damage done onto them. And all of these Skeleton Horse Archers now going to start being able to have a nice bit of skirmish into the side flanks here, be targeting these Slays and Rat Ogres, getting a nice decent bit of work. The Eshin Triads do rotate around to kind of just screen out the chariots. Now they do have stock, so they don't actually see it. This is actually the Ishka's Triads. So these Ishka's Triads do have a little bit of a clone ability, which does give a second unit onto the field and gives them unspottable when that is used. A nice little use to kind of distract and then get around and get a nice little charge in for a nice little bit of surprise. Carrion, though, are committing themselves to melee right now, just kind of shut down the Ikit Zapzap for now, just kind of free up their flank, which they're overloading with all of their mobility at this point. And the Eshin Sorcerer as well, kind of pushing forward, I think trying to get a little bit of a throwing star in, but unfortunately with this hill, unable to get any good line of sight in that nature. And the front line, though, is going to be underway for the Skaven and Tomb Kings. The Skaven Slaves definitely not going to be able to hold up very long. However, the Eshin Triads, that's going to be a different story entirely, and they will do quite well against these chariots. They are bonus versus large after all, and they do have Weeping Blades, which reduces armor, and that's kind of thing that you just need to keep at least one of them alive for that late game, because you need them to really whittle down that armor of Cetra. And Cetra is starting to take quite a bit of damage, though, from the Ikit Zapzap, as the Packmaster and Broodwhore now just kind of targeting these chariots who have kind of gotten onto the Ikit Zapzap, at least for a little bit, and they will be trying to screen things out as best they can. The Rat Ogres have taken a mighty blow early on, and the bounce power actually is pretty much in the Skaven's favor right now, ever so slightly, even though they have lost quite a few units on this flank. Though in terms of the front line, the chariots taking a lot of damage here, getting stuck in with just a bunch of Clan Rat Spears and losing the Carrion kind of early on. I think they need to be a little bit more cautious with those guys. Dive onto the units when they could, and when all of the pressure from the Nehekran Horsemen, which is now coming into play here, as all of the Nehekran Horsemen collapsing onto the back line, but in come the Ishka's Triads, going to be rotating around to help support the Throt and the Packmaster. And it looks like we do have a summon of Rat Ogres as well onto the field, and an Ushep's Incantation of Desiccation is cast onto this blob, minus 24 melee attack and melee defense. So one of probably the good times to be casting that with all of these units to kind of counteract the Rat Ogre summon, to kind of make that a little bit less worth their while. And there is that throwing star firing away into Cetra, a nice low costing spell. But now both the Packmaster and Throt can be engaging with Cetra, and Cetra does not want to be sticking around too long, though Ushep's Incantation of Desiccation is still online, though he has taken a ton of damage. He does have that Blessed Blade Patrol also popped, which does give him that fire damage, and he is doing a lot of damage to that Packmaster. In comes the Skeleton Horse Archers trying to just bog things down, and I think that was a very needed play to be used right here, because they needed to kind of free up Cetra, even at the cost of one of their Skeleton Horse Archers. Otherwise, the front line for the Skaven is holding so far, as the Eshin Triads really kind of being the anchors here, and the Rat Ogres on the left flank of the Skaven able to kind of help clean things up, keep those pesky chariots at bay, and even keeping the Nehekran Horsemen. But unfortunately, the Warlane Cannons did get pushed off, at least for the time being, but they have returned, and in come the Clan Rats to really kind of clean things up, as that Eshin Sorcerer is completely surrounded at this point, and he is going to be getting routed off. But just as he is getting low, the Rat Ogres come in to save the day, trying to charge on in. But this is where the fight is going to be kind of more or less decided here, as we do have an Ushapli summon surrounding the Packmaster and Throt, as Cetra is trying once again. He does have the Incantation of Protection on him, which it just squared off there as I said it. So he has lost that extra protection, and he is going to be pulling right on out, allowing his Ushapti to try and get as much damage off. And the Packmaster and Throt trying to pull out, though the Packmaster taking a lot of damage. He must have had at least one of his Remoldered popped on top of him, because he is getting close to his healing cap, and he's taking a ton of damage so far, but Throt is still sitting nice and healthy. And at this point, I mean, you have the Ishka's Triads, you have the Warp-Mining Cannon's crews, which are surprisingly still firing away and making connection with Settra, and that is a lot of damage that is definitely not going to be wanted to be taken by Settra, because he is going to be needed to stay alive for as long as possible. I mean, they have gotten rid of the Packmaster, the Skeleton Horse Archers were able to shatter it, and Throt is actually getting kind of low in leadership himself. The Ushapti, the mass, is holding Throt in place. He is unable to push his way out of there, though he should be able to stabilize, especially with the Ushapti on the last legs of its own summon. But the Ishka's Triads hunting down Settra, nipping at his heels, doing some nice bit of damage, chipping away at his health bit by bit. And especially with that Eshin Sorcerer now back again, it is going to be using Brittle Bone, reducing that speed and melee defense, so slowing him down even more. And in comes Throt, the shots from the Warp Lightning Cannon, and that is going to be enough to finish off Settra himself. He is going to be crumbling away, and a final little spell into the rear, but Throt finishes him off before the spell is able to connect. And with Settra gone, I think that is going to be just about it for the Tomb King forces. It looks like the Skaven are going to be pulling through here. Frontline just kind of slowly crumbling away with what is left. And then it is just the Mobility Core, but the Balance Power just on the edges of army losses. And seeing that is going to be all she wrote as Orcman takes game 2. And with that, he takes the series. Let's update the scorecard to reflect that, and then quickly go over how the battle did fare for both sides. So for the Tomb King side, Carrion, I think, committed just a little too early here. Needed to wait until all of the units collapsed. I know they wanted to shut down the Warp Lightning Cannons, so maybe only using one of them instead of both to kind of start shutting things down. They didn't really have anything to fear when they're up in the sky. I mean, the Slingers weren't going to be able to do a whole lot to them, and they really needed to just kind of make use of their Skeleton Horse Archers, which did do quite well. 1,300 on this one, 800 on that one. Very good unit in this matchup, I think. And then the Chariots as well. Probably stuck in melee for just a little bit too long. Those Ishka's Triads, and I mean, the Eshin Triads did very well for this battle. And then the Mobility Core doing okay work. Well, I'm actually getting 1,000 in total value, and I think that was kind of the big thing, is like the Mobility Core was the strength of this build, and they just needed to use that a little bit better. And I think going for a more of a surround off, they overloaded one flank, and there was just probably too much saturation and not enough targets. They needed to get a full back surround of the Skaven formation, and then collapsed upon them from the front and rear, and really pull them apart that way. And I think that would have been the way in, and etc. Yeah, just only getting 700. I think in this particular matchup, it would probably be good to have him on his Chariot. Having him up on his War Sphinx is nice and all, but on his Chariot, he's just able to kind of drift in and out of these formations, and I really do like him when he is on that as well. Now, the Ikets Zap Zap getting 1,600 in total value, able to fire for a lot of the fight. They're doing a ton of damage to Settra. Rat Ogre's doing okay work. I mean, Skaven Slave Slingers, I mean, well, some of them doing decent work. They do cost 200 for them on their unit value. And then the Ishka's Triads doing very good work, 1,100. Other one getting 674. Now, they do cost 750, the Eshin Triads in base, but just having them, that Weeping Blade, definitely very helpful against Settra. Mostly just Settra, and a little bit to the Chariots as well with that armor sundering. And then we have Clan Vulcan Tailsashers doing some decent work otherwise for the most part. The rest of the units, nothing to write home about. Packmaster doing some nice work. Ashen Sorcerer was kind of there. Nice little interesting to see it. A little bit of variations in the spells for the Skaven. And then Throt as well, getting only 800. Otherwise, most of that, yeah, was with the Ikets Zap Zap doing a bunch of good work, and then, yeah, the Packmaster did some decent work as well for the Skaven. But that's going to be it for this series. Very good set indeed. I do hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good one.